Okay, hello everyone. We are now live and we are here with another Between the Pages book chat with Joseph. And I forgot to ask you how to pronounce your last name.
Smith.
Anyway, so we will just let Joseph Carrabis.
Very good.
Okay. We'll let him introduce himself and what kind of things he writes. Okay, so take it away.
Hi there, everybody. My name is Joseph Carrabis, and I've written all. No, I haven't. No, I haven't written all these books. I've read quite a few of them, but not all of them yet. Who wants to be in a house full of books you've already read? Anyway, my own writing. I tell people that I write autobiography, and so far, anyway, it gets sold as science fiction, fantasy, poetry, children's stories. Horror, yeah, magic realism, all the good dark arts.
Okay, so I know you've written a military sci-fi novel and you've written a lot of short stories as well. So what is your favorite and what kind of differences do you find in writing between a novel length book or a short story?
Well, I personally, to be honest with you, I don't find a lot of difference involved in writing length. By that, I mean all the story elements have to be there. You have to have character, you have to have description, you have to have narration, if you have exposition, make it minor. You have to have dialogue. You have to be able to set scenes. You have to create mood, atmosphere. You have to be able to present tone. You have to engage the readers. So it doesn't matter whether you're writing a flash fiction piece, which to me, writing flash fiction is like building a ship in a bottle. Everything has to be there, but it has to be really small. So it doesn't matter if you're writing flash fiction or a series. What is important and the same through all is that you actively work to engage the reader as rapidly as possible to make sure that they understand the world that you're creating, what we now call world building, that they buy into it, that they accept it, that they find the character, the main character, sympathetic, that they feel for the character, that they want the character to succeed. So in a novel, you may have as much as the first 15 pages to accomplish that. I personally like to accomplish it literally in the first paragraph, definitely by the first page. I want the reader to go, yep, okay, I'm here, I'm involved. If it's a short story, again, I want the first sentence, the first paragraph to really engage and grab the reader. I have a series of posts on my blog, great opening lines and why. And it doesn't matter if it's a short story or a novel or anything in between. I take an opening line from a story that really, really impresses me. And here's why this works. I dissect it. And only because I want to learn. I'm not trying to look how smart I am, because I'm not smart. But that's how I learn, by explaining it.
So do you like to use themes in your stories in your books? And do you have a favorite if you do?
Do I like to use stories in my books?
Well, themes.
Oh, like themes. I'm sorry. When you get old, you kind of lose track of stuff.
Yeah.
I would say, well, actually, my editor gave me this one. She said the two things you'll always, talking to somebody else, she said the two things you'll always find in Joseph's books, Joseph's stories, are a deep understanding of human psychology and love. And I'm grateful. And I guess I would have to agree with that, because the military thriller is really, at its core, a love story, but not in the way most people would think. The short story collection, Tales Told Around Celestial Campfires, that is, each story in there is basically a love story. But again, not as most people think. Love can take many forms. And the other novel that I just finished rewriting, Empty Sky, everything in there. As a matter of fact, one of the characters even says to all the other characters, everyone is here because they are caring about someone else.
Yeah. So, yeah, a good story does have relationships, strong relationships. So, yeah, I can see that. Do you find that playing love off something like sci-fi or horror or fantasy uh, makes the love story stronger, or do you have to work at it?
Uh, well, I don't really. I know that my stuff very often gets sold as science fiction, but I have never been comfortable considering myself a sci-fi author. I believe that I write stories about people. And sometimes that has to be in a science fiction setting to make sense. In the case of The Augmented Man, the military sci-fi thriller, um, the main character had is basically changed from a human being into kind of basically a human tank. And as the story progresses, we realize why he allowed that to happen. It was because of not being loved as a child. He was a traumatized child, massively abused. So he thought of himself as a monster. So, yes, turn me into a monster. But at the end, by the time the story continues, there's a reason for him to want to become unmonster. Now, you look at that story was originally written in 1990. And in 1990, all of the technology that's in the story was already available. Nobody had done what I claimed to do with it, but it was already there. It was already available. When we released the story in 2019, last year, so long ago, the only things I really had to change were cell phone technology and projectors, in the sense of showing a screen. Now we used holograms or virtual reality. So my stories, whether they're horror, science fiction, fantasy, whatever, they're really character stories that happen to be in some kind of interesting setting to make the emphasis on the relationship understandable.
Yeah. So, do you often play with the monster versus human theme? Because I mean, I do the psychological, um, dark parts of the human in my horror stories, and monsters versus humans. So, do you play with that a lot, or is that one of your favorite things to do?
Well, monster versus human in the sense of an individual having those personalities.
Yeah,
Yeah,
the psychological aspects.
yeah. There's this beautiful quote. I don't remember who it's by, but there's this beautiful quote. But it's basically how many monsters would walk the streets if our faces were as unfinished as our minds. And that to me is just so incredibly, it's so vivid. When you understand that people walking down the street have so much going on in their psyches, in their minds. Doesn't matter how old they are, they can be 5 years old all the way up to my age and beyond. They are a mishmash of experiences. And we have learned through, excuse me, various psychological experiences, various experiments and stuff. The Stanford experiment probably being the best known one, that it doesn't take a lot for a kind, generous, giving person to become a horrible, mutilating monster that you don't want to be around. The reason that Hannibal Lecter worked so well is because you wouldn't recognize him going down the street. He fit in. That's what made him the real monster. If his external persona, if his physiology was matching his internal world, stay away from him. And again, that was the thing about The Augmented Man. They had the internal horror. They just matched the body to match what was inside the mind.
Yeah. Do you think it's easier to explore those inner demons, that inner darkness in genres like sci-fi and horror? Does it make it more palatable for the reader?
Um, that's an interesting question when you consider the Isabel Fall, I believe her name is, or Isabel Fell, brouhaha that's going around. I don't think it is necessarily easier to explore those things in a specific genre. I think it's easier for me to explore those things in a specific genre. In Tales Told Around Celestial Campfires, which is the anthology of previously published work, there's science fiction, there's fantasy, there's horror in there. Probably the least fantastical story in there is one called The Wait, about a guy dealing with some failed relationships from 30 years in his past. He basically abandons his wife and his son. The way that works out is all internal to him, but he's not a monster. He's not anything else. The way it all resolves is a bit fantastic, but only because whenever we do that kind of time travel in our minds, we're recreating our own histories. We're recreating somebody else's history. So the fact that we do that is fantastic in itself.
So, what do you think makes a good villain or a good antagonist in a story?
Realizing and appreciating their humanity. Knowing that they are not all the time those horrible creatures. Making them somehow sympathetic makes the villain much more interesting. You can have a nasty, horrible person, but that's two-dimensional. It's kind of like the Western version of the Satan character versus the Eastern version of the Satan character. The Western version of the Satan character in the past 1,000 years or so, he's just evil incarnate. Well, originally, he was not evil incarnate. He was the Inquisitor. He was the one who would bring people before God, whatever God was, and say, look what this person did. So God could say, I forgive them. Yes, great. That's a bizarre job to have. It's kind of like the guy who was the state attorney against Perry Mason. The guy knew he was always going to lose every episode of the show. You had to feel bad for him. They even had a couple of episodes where he won because the audience was like, how can he lose all the time? I quit, But the Eastern version of Satan is he so loved God that he would not bow to humans. Very different.
Mm.
And also, I'm not going to bow to you. Big deal. So there's not that concept of I'm going to do something. No, it's more like, hey, live your life. Don't get in my way. I won't get in yours. Wow, fascinating difference. So I prefer that version because there is humanity, if you will, or there is deviltry. I can do that with words. I'm an author. We can do that kind of stuff. When you make the antagonist personable, relatable, human somehow, you make them much more interesting because then the reader, I know they're going to fail, but how are they going to fail? In Empty Sky, the antagonist is a rotten son of a gun. Now we know why. But in the story, you understand why he is. And as someone commented to me on Twitter, I think it was, they were reading the book, and they read the chapter dealing with the antagonist, and their comment on Twitter was, "You did a great job making me understand what that kid went through to make him be the adult he was." Good. My job here is done.
Yeah. Okay, do you have a favorite scene or story that you've written?
The next one.
That's a good answer. It's always the next one.
Yeah.
Okay, so have you? I know you write mostly in sci-fi and other speculative fiction. Have you ever thought to branch out into another genre, like say romance?
As a matter of fact, yes, there's a story that I work on or off. And the title of the story is Richie and Phil, A Celebration of Life. And I sent it out. It's actually on my blog, in the subscriber section of my blog, which all of you should join. And a longtime reader of my stuff, who's read a lot of my stuff, actually called me up and he said, "Joe, what are you writing chick lit? What is this?" And I said, "Well, more to the point, do you like it?" He said, "Yeah, it's great. I love it." And this guy, so everyone can know, he's a power lifter. And, I don't think of a power lifter getting emotionally involved in something he considers chick lit and going, "Yeah, this is really good." So, yeah, I do. I can't say I explore. The Richie and Phil story just came to me. Wow, that's a great story. Let me write that down. A story that I've been working on for a very long time is, I guess I would call it a murder mystery, except it's really not, because it's a true story of a triple murder in Maine that I keep on going back to, and got to change this, got to change that. So excuse me, I'll explore other genres as they fit the story. But I don't sit down and go, "I'm going to write a science fiction story." No, I'm going to write a story about people. And it may end up being science fictional.
Yeah. So the story comes first, the genre comes second.
Yes, very much so. Yes.
So do you have anything else coming out in the near future, or are you working on anything?
Well, the Empty Sky rewrite is done, and there's a standing offer for everyone out there. If you buy if you read a copy of Empty Sky and post a review, I will send you a signed copy of the rewrite when it's published. I'm currently jobbing that around. I have one publisher interested, still reviewing their contract, so can't say yay or nay that I'll go with them. I have a lot of short stories that I'm, sending out, seeing if anybody's interested in. So far in 2020, I have, I think, 2 or 3 pieces that are already being held for second reads. So that's reassuring. It doesn't mean they're going to get sold, but okay, good. At least second read. Anything is encouraging.
Yeah. If it's not a rejection, it's encouraging.
Yeah, exactly. And two other books that I'm currently working on. One is another science fantasy, like Empty Sky, which is a science fantasy. Somebody told me that Empty Sky reminded them of American Gods, which I thought, wow, okay,
that's high praise in my book. So
yeah, well, again, yeah, I was actually stunned when they wrote me that. This reminds me of American Gods, because I thought it was more like A Wrinkle in Time by Madeline L'Engle. But okay, fine, I'll take it. I put that in my pitch there, but it's like American Gods. So one of the other ones is a science fantasy called The Inheritors, which is a lot of my stories involve children who grow up and have to experience the world and make a decision about the rest of their life. The Inheritors is an example of that. The other one is based on my many many years, more than two, of working as an anthropologist and dealing with cultures all over the globe, and doing what I can to help them retain their identities. You know, another example of a story along those lines, two examples. In Tales Told Around Celestial Campfires, there's a story called Manahe, about an individual who basically has a 9-to-5 high pressure financial job, and gets pulled back into his ancestral's teachings. People have told me it's great. It actually got purchased back in 95 and then anthologized in 98, and it's in my anthology, and I'm sending it out again. Another one is The Goatmen of Agira, which is very loosely based on my studies of the cultures in the Andes. And it's fascinating. San Pilarski, the editor of Piker Press, she bought it to run as a serial in her magazine. And I wasn't sure that she would like it. I didn't, have a good read on her. But she got back to me and she said, she actually wrote me, I was so upset when people came into my office because it stopped me from reading the story. And she started yelling at people, get away, I'm busy. Can't you see I'm reading this? I'm like, yeah, wow. When you can get an editor that involved in your story, that's, yes.
Okay, so I think we'll wrap it up here. And why don't you tell everybody where they can find you online, website, Twitter, all that sort of thing.
I must say that I'm extremely inventive. My website is called josephcarrabis.com. Just look at my name, no space in the middle, .com. I'm on Twitter as Joseph Carrabis. Wow. I'm on LinkedIn as Joseph Carrabis. Hey. I'm on Facebook as Joseph Carrabis author. Whoa. I went out of the ballpark with that one. Pretty much just do a search on my name and you'll find me. I'm on Amazon, and you should all go look for me there. Also on Barnes and Noble. But,
Yes, I recommend you all go look for him. His books look very interesting, I must say. I took a look at the Amazon page. So anyway, so thank you for being here. It was a pleasure talking to you. And that's it for today's episode of Between the Book Page. Okay, so close to being perfect. So that's it for Between the Pages Book Chat. So I'll see you all when we see you. Bye.
Bye-bye.